You can see the initial edge is sharp enough to push cut newsprint. Now for a bit of amusement. This man is a bit wonky. So, no problem doing very fine slices. Interestingly enough, the edge on this knife is comparable in thickness to most kitchen knives, even in the chopping region. And if you go down here by the choil, it's actually thinner. But it's difficult to work with that area because of the guard. So you're working out close to the tip. Works about 15th thou thick. And it cuts relatively well. Now of course, probably not the knife that you want to do a day's cutting with in the kitchen. The interesting thing is that if you look at the amount of force required to make the cuts, it's relatively light with Keffler's blade. It's actually less than the force required for this small Japanese Santoku. And the reason is, even though this little Santoku has a much slimmer blade, the actual edge angle is extremely high, which shows you how important that is to overall cutting ability. And of course, something like the Spyderco Santoku, which not only has a similar flat grind to the Keffler, it's actually higher with thinner stock, a thinner edge, and a more acute angle, cuts through with almost no force. But it is an interesting comparison to show you that even though this blade is monstrous and is mainly designed as a chopper, and I'm actually using the most robust portion of the blade, which is the chopping section, unless you get a highly optimized kitchen knife like this, Keffler's blade easily outperforms your standard stock kitchen knives because it's perfectly optimized for chopping with no necessary thickness in there, which means it carries over to other cutting tasks quite well. Now potatoes, like wood, are quite a bit in variation from one to the other, so I'll need to cut a few just to get an idea of how much force I'm using. That was about 14 pounds. But you can see very easily. Similar size one. You can feel noticeably more resistance with this Santoku when it's starting to cut because of the initial edge angle, but the overall force is a little bit behind Keffler, because the blade stock is so thick, so on thicker cuts it tends to catch up with it, but it's a bit dicey comparing just on 2 potatoes. That came up to be 12, so just do another one to make sure. Yeah, same thing, so that was about 10. And I'm just doing a really, really coarse chop. These are going to be slightly baked. Another similar size one. Yep, same as before. It was about 13 pounds for the initial chop. And again, this is with the thickest section of the blade. And of course, this is very little effort, although it's not like this is the blade that you take and prepare a meal for a huge number of people. Now again, if you take a similar size, this is actually a bit smaller, but and the Spyderco floats through it, and it only took about 6 pounds. And again, the Spyderco has thinner stock, like the Japanese traditional Santoku, but it has an even thinner edge than the Keffler, and it's sharpened at a much lower angle. Well, slightly lower angle. Yeah, that was only 5 pounds. So at most the Spyderco is taking around 6, and you would expect it to have an advantage over the Keffler. But again, the surprising thing is that Dan's blade, as big and large as it is, can easily keep up with this, simply because the edge angle on this is a bit too high. Now with broccoli, most people don't like the big thick stalk on the bottom. Cut that off relatively fine. Get rid of that. Now you got little florets. And one more slice, and they'll all pop apart. And again, the tip on the Keffler is finer than the rest of it, so it snakes through the top of that relatively easily. Now it won't match again the performance of the Spyderco, which not only has slightly higher cutting ability, but significantly more nimble. So again, back off the biggest section of the blade, take some of the florets off, fall away, and rinse and repeat.